Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Northern Affinity live video across our various platforms. So, as usual, we were here on the Facebook page, we're on the LinkedIn page. We'll also be later be able to see it on our YouTube channel as well. One thing to mention for anyone who's watching, if you do have any questions or comments or anything, please do put them in and type them in, and hopefully we can try and answer as many as we can. Now, as probably most people are aware, I don't think there's ever been such a time where business finance and funding has been so high profile, whether it's to do with lending or grants or whatever it may be. And delighted to say, as you can see, I'm here today with Jeremy Meadowcraft. Now, Jeremy, I know he's doing a lot of work at the moment, helping to kind of educate people and help people on the various things to do with finance and business funding. There are so many different areas of commercial finance, and I don't want to embarrass Jeremy by saying this, but I don't think I've ever met anyone with such a breadth of knowledge of the subject. So he's a perfect person for this. So, like I mentioned, any questions, throw them in, and we'll try and answer some. So before we go into the questions I have, Jeremy, do you mind kind of just give us a bit of a quick explanation who you are and what you're doing at the moment and that type of stuff? That'd be great.
Sure. Well, those who don't know me, Jeremy Meadowcraft. I'm really an ex-banker, but since coming out of banking, I learned so much about other types of funding, and that's really my area of expertise. So you probably might have seen me on the sort of funding circuit around Leeds, talking to businesses, startups and owners and founders about different ways to raise different types of finance for the business you need. I currently work for Ernest Wilson, and I help people, showing them places and how and where to raise the funding they need to grow or start up their business.
Brilliant, Jeremy. Thank you. So first question, obviously, we've already touched on it at the moment. There's a lot going on in the last 6 weeks or so. I'd love to know your kind of opinions on kind of what's gone well, what's maybe not gone so well, and how things can kind of going to be evolving over the next few weeks in terms of the business funding.
So I said recently that never before has the funding landscape looked like this, and we've gone through such a massive change. And whilst lockdown is affecting us mentally and physically and spiritually in lots of different ways, as far as business owners go, it also is driving a bit of, to some degree, panic. I mean, we've never had this before. Business owners are frightened. Business owners are real human beings, and the employees of those businesses are similarly suffering and fearing what's tomorrow going to look like, let alone next week or next month. So with some of the funding schemes that have evolved over just the last 5 weeks, it's a constantly changing landscape, and it's hard enough to stay abreast of all of the changes, as well as communicating them and being able to share those with business owners who really are in a time of need.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask you is, what are the types of things that people are asking about at the moment? Because I know it's something I've talked to you about before. For those who don't know, I do have a background myself in commercial finance, and it's unbelievable how many people, because it's an area that's very jargon heavy, is finance. I'm sure you'll agree with me on that, Jeremy. It's kind of very confusing for people. So what are the type of questions people are asking in relation to all the different schemes and everything out there at the moment?
Well, I just precurse that with, you've got to remember that 99% of businesses in the UK are what's called small businesses. And sometimes the news headlines is talking about Jaguar or British Airways, these huge multinationals. Yes, they're in a place, but we're generally dealing with business you can see that employ people and create and drive contribution to our regional economy. So these businesses are generally the smaller businesses. They're owner managed. And in all my time as a bank manager, when I used to go and see business owners, I always remember how isolated they felt. So if they're not in a network, if they don't have good accountants, good bankers around them, good people, then where do they go for that information? They probably go to the media. And is that giving them the right balance? Because for their business and their region and their size, the funding options available to them differ. So the questions that they ask are, can I get this scheme? What's available for me? And what is there out there that I don't know about? That's a very common one.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I was going to ask you about the kind of, obviously the most recent update is the Bounceback loans that have been made available from earlier this week. And from kind of what the information I've been seeing, it feels like this has gone quite well. Businesses are getting the finance quite quickly. I mean, what have you heard from various people you've spoken to?
Well, I'm afraid the anecdotal evidence is just that until we've got some stats. 110,000 applications in day one across only 11 lenders. So how on earth can they deal with that volume? Bearing in mind that this scheme launched on Monday morning is very different, because this is an instruction, really a scheme that the banks are being asked to deliver without checking any viability or affordability or any kind of forecast. So this really is almost a handout from the Chancellor, very, very well needed and very well received. But it is a scheme available to people so long as they have a business that exists, a pre-existing business is genuine. So the banks are doing the anti-fraud checks. But basically, it's a scheme aimed to get up to £50,000 out of businesses within 24, 36 hours. I'm hearing about people that have been declined, but I'm hearing a lot of people who have been approved. But again, with those sorts of volumes, we really need the stats, and it's only really day 2, isn't it, or day 3?
Yeah, I don't know if you've know. I've not heard this about people getting declined. Has there been reasons that they're getting declined for? Is it kind of technicalities essentially, rather than the actual business?
Well, I mean, with C-bills, which was the precursor to this, and that still needed you to explain what the money was going to be for, which was obviously a drop in sales income, for a period that you would deem reasonable, probably 3-4 months' time. But you still had to demonstrate affordability. And that is the cornerstone. That is the canon of responsible lending. If you're asking people, they don't have to prove affordability, which is why, to some degree, the banks are a bit nervous about this, because it's saying, I'm eligible, you don't need to prove it's going to be affordable. There's no repayments for 12 months, no interest for 12 months. Then the proof of the pudding is whether the borrower can afford it is going to be in 12 months' time, not next week or next month. So, to some degree, the only reason you would get declined is if your business wasn't existing, if you haven't, if you can't establish it's a proper business, and it's really an anti-fraud check. So most of the applicants should be approved by default.
Absolutely. Right. So we had a couple of questions in, Jeremy, before the much better questions than I had prepared. So we'll have a quick look at them. Anthony has asked us, are you seeing any differences between the likes of the tier 1, tier 2 lenders' focus points for making decisions and judging future risk?
Well, so under the C-bills loan, there are 40 plus lenders approved. They're most of the high street banks that most people would know, but obviously tier 1 and tier 2 lenders come into that. And some lenders have actually withdrawn from that scheme, and some lenders are applying, some of the smaller names. With the B-bills loan, there's only 11. And they're high street banks, you would know them, apart from Danske Bank, who you might think, oh, really? They're high street bank names. So at the minute, there's only 11 approved for those. So really, they're major banks. And as I say, they're not testing affordability. They're testing, are you a UK business? Do you exist? Have you been affected by COVID-19? Are you likely to continue trading? And therefore, will this money help you to continue to survive? And that's really where they're being approved. I wrote a post on my website and for it to help people, show them, and it was called How to Impress a Lender. And it's really about how to present a borrowing request, whether it's a startup or a loan. And it was about putting yourself in the shoes of the lender, a responsible lender. And what they're trying to see is to demonstrate affordability. Nobody wants to lend irresponsibly. So the applicant has got to really present themselves that here's my current MI. This is what my business is doing. This is what I'm hoping, thinking, planning. This is the opportunity we've got. And this is why it's realistic and probable that I can borrow this money. And that's really where people need to present themselves to a lender to make their job easier. And lenders want to hear it in that manner so they can make their decisions quicker. And that speeds that whole process up.
Oh, absolutely. And a good question here, actually, from Angela, which is essentially, are they considering credit ratings when it comes to this loan?
So technically not, because that would demonstrate affordability or lack of affordability. So if you've got high debt gearing and you're applying for another loan, again, a responsible lender under B-bills would say, well, I'm sorry, I think that's too much and I don't think you can afford it. Under the B-bills, no. Under the C-bills, yes. And bear in mind, banks are lending other funding other than this as well. Bear in mind, we've got other funders other than banks who are all assessing credit in the normal way that they would look at affordability, serviceability of debt, leverages, likelihood of the sales revenue that we're enjoying up until March happening. Is this lockdown going to be a gradual release rather than an overnight back to where we were? So, all of that has to come in terms of credit testing, and that should be done properly by lenders. So credit ratings do come in, but for that one scheme on Monday, then no. And bear in mind, there's a range of other funds available still out there. So, I talk about debt funding as one. I talk about equity funding again. It's very real for people. Obviously, there's a number of grant schemes that I've always talked about, and often what I bring to the table is a blended solution. That I had a client last week who was wanting to borrow some funding. Actually, the reason they were cash flow short was because they spent all the cash buying assets. So all these lovely shiny assets, these machines had no debt on them whatsoever. But in theory, if he'd financed those, he would have retained his cash to pay his weekly, monthly outgoings. So things like that, things like asset finance and invoice finance, play a really important part as well. Not just now, but always, because it's different horses for different courses, and there's a blended solution that's often the best. It's just if people don't know about it, how would they know to consider it? So I show them how to blend those together.
Absolutely, I think that's the case, and is it that obviously we're hearing the headlines about the various things that the government schemes, and that's absolutely fine. But there is a lot of different types of options out there, and I mean, obviously, the scheme that was announced on Monday, I think most people would concede it's a very favourable product in terms of interest rates and things like that. But there is other options out there. And actually, on that point, and we had a question on LinkedIn from Neil. Petty's asked about VAT funding. And do you think buyers need VAT funding?
Well, at Ernest Wilson, we decided to put all this information together into a weekly webinar for our business customers. And boy, did we get questions like this. The business owners were ringing in. And again, there's been some delayed payment schemes by HMRC. So you can delay paying your VAT. You can delay submitting your returns. You can delay submitting. And all that is helping the business owners retain cash. Yep. The question is, can you lend for VAT? Well, actually on the B-Bills loan, on the British Business Bank's website, where it says purpose of the funding, that loan can actually be used to refinance, which I find surprising, because people could use that money to repay another loan or to pay a liability. So for VAT, technically, you need to speak to your accountant, because you can delay. As long as you do your return, you can delay that. That's something the Treasury is trying to help you with it as well. But again, all of these schemes and all of these fund options come together. The Small Business Rates Relief Grant is something that I've brought to the fore. Superb, and it's a one-time, handout again from the Treasury to help businesses in retail and leisure. But that has been massively taken up, and the councils up and down the country, again, were a bit slow to get it started, but then got online with an online claiming system, and a lot of businesses took that as opposed to borrowing. A lot of businesses I've spoken to said, I don't want to borrow out of this, but that grant has enabled them to say, well, for my business, I don't have to borrow. But when that money runs out, maybe May, maybe June, who knows, maybe July, then they might then need to come back and take this borrowing. The fact there's been such a clamour for this scheme on Monday, isn't a surprise, but it shows you that people are worried, and maybe people are thinking they need to think for their business how much they need. But these schemes will be around for a while. It's not like they're going to be only here for 5 days. And the SBIR grants are superb. VAT delaying payments is superb. And then lending schemes or flexible borrowing facilities from your normal lenders and from the secondary lenders who I deal with all play a part. But you've got to be aware of the breadth of them to be able to say what is the right one for me.
Yeah, I mean, one question I was going to ask is obviously we've mentioned grants, and again, probably most people are aware of the ones that are kind of essentially related to business rate relief. But I know it's something that you look at quite often, is what other grants are out there that's, forgetting about the current situation, but what, I don't know, you're not going to go into any detail about them, but kind of generally speaking for businesses, what type of grants are out there in a inverted commas normal world?
Yeah, well, I'll keep it brief then. But I was at an event 6 months ago, and I put a post on saying there were 13 grant schemes presenting in this event. I think they all had 90 seconds, and I posted saying, "Look, even in my world, I think I know 8 or 9 of those schemes pretty well." But my question was, who's in this room that doesn't know anything about them? Because they are valid. And when I talk about things like PAPI or the manufacturing growth or the adventure team and all of these people in the LEPs and the chambers and the networks across the country that are there to support businesses, either with non-financial help, knowledge transfer, or funded schemes, contribution towards schemes. There's a wealth of support out there, and they all do a fantastic job. But you have to go outside your role to learn about these schemes. And I'm afraid, I learned about all that after I came out of banking, because I realized there's a place for that and a place for that, and blend them together. So yes, there are schemes out there that will help you with capital grants. They're not aimed to replace money in the current lockdown situation we're in right now. They're not a solution for that. But again, they could be a part solution to why you're needing funding for new vehicles. Remember, a lot of businesses are taking stock right now. And a lot of businesses are possibly pivoting and thinking, well, what's the opportunity? How can we continue to thrive and make money? What we might need 5 new vehicles. Well, there might be a grant to half support that. You might need a new machine to do that. There is a grant that will fund part of that. So learning about those is really important, and you need to have the contacts or people like me stand on stage and talk about this, because we want that word to be out. It's not a secret, it's really not a secret. But going outside your comfort zone and finding to find that information, so that you go, oh, I've never heard of it. Well, great. Then you're one more convert. And, that's what I do. I signpost people to places where you can access these funds for your business.
Thank you. I mean, one question I was going to ask is kind of about the future. And I know very much it's a bit of a crystal ball thing at the moment. And we had a question from Brian, which, well, this question hides our faces, quite a long question. That's probably no bad thing for people. But he's kind of asked about kind of as the things move forward. Obviously, a lot of people have taken this scheme as it's come in, but plus obviously there's rumours about the furlough scheme being reduced over the next few months. So I get it's kind of where are we going? So that was very much part of my question. Is what happens after this? What do we? And I know again it's crystal ball time, but how do you see things evolving, I guess, for the rest of this year, from a finance and grant point of view?
Wow, that's $1 million question. Perhaps we need to ask Laura Koonsberg that sort of question. But I don't have an answer for that. Only that 5 weeks ago, when I did that first webinar for our business customers, and the following week the schemes had changed. The following week, the schemes had adapted and been developed. The fourth week, there'd been some pushback, and the Chancellor changed them and opened them up, like the self-employed income replacement scheme, as opposed to the JRS. And then businesses owners that were taking dividends were saying we're left out. So these schemes have had to evolve and change. So over the last 5 weeks, I've been doing them every week, because the landscape's changed and the schemes changed. And then B-bills came out on it was only announced last Tuesday, and it was launched on Monday. So what's going to happen is it's going to continue to be a changing landscape. What's going to happen is we don't know, but it's not going to stay the same. And what's going to happen is we're probably going to come out of this in a gradual way. People's behaviours and adapting to what the law says, what the rules say, is going to affect what sort of sales revenue businesses are going to get in. So I think we're going through a massive period of change. What we've got to do is stay abreast, widen our networks, make sure we can talk to the right people who can maybe help. And Mike, your network is key for that. Who do you know that knows a lot of people? You don't need to go out and meet 120 people. You need to get into a network. You need to get to speak to good people who are connected, who can then make those introductions. Because Lord knows, I've had to upskill over the last 5 weeks as the knowledge has come in. I love to share that with the businesses, but there's so much to know, isn't there? We've got to share that knowledge and pass it around. And as that adapts, who knows what's going to happen next week and the week after?
Absolutely. So I would imagine there's quite a few people watching this who are essentially small business owners, Now they'll probably be aware of the schemes and the various things, but as I kind of touched on earlier, it can be quite confusing for a lot of people. So where would you advise the kind of starting place for them is? What would they do before they make a decision to go for whatever loans are available or not, as the case may be?
Well, ideally, it's to talk to somebody who understands that market. I mean, if the banks do a great job, but I guess their knowledge of the third sector won't be very high. Credit brokers, are there to understand the full market knowledge. But again, the third sector, how many people know that? How many third sector people do you know who are ex-bankers? It's really hard. All I do is I try and stay abreast. I've got networks, good contacts with people in all of those, because I'm not the oracle, but I do feel I know where to go. And whether it's understanding how credit policies change between banks, let alone how their policy changes sectorally or through an economic issue like this, or whether it's products that are coming to market. There's loads of new tech products available. Whether it's the funding, the equity funding that I ran an equity fund, ran an equity investment pitch event for 6 months, and learning the pockets of investors that are about wanting to see opportunities like that. It's so broad and so long. And founders tend to just assume equity is the right thing. They want to go on Dragon's Den and they want to raise money. And actually, they might be right for debt funding. They might be right for stage 1 equity and stage 2 debt funding. So again, I think everyone's at different stages. Everyone knows a little bit of that jigsaw. I don't think anybody knows the full jigsaw, but who can you access? Who do you know, who you can trust, who has a good network and can say, yep, I can show you 7, 8, 9 different options, and then I can introduce you to 3 or 4 more people. It's like everything in life. You need to have good friends, good colleagues, and people around you, well connected, who can show you some of the help and suggestions and solutions for you in your business.
Absolutely. Now, I think the current situation, obviously, a lot of people have required something quick to get over a short or medium term cash flow issue in most cases, but I guess the suggestion is if you are looking for something else, essentially investment in the business to grow and develop, even in these times, take your time. Don't jump 2 feet into something, and speak to various people. As you've said, that feels like the best advice for anybody. I just finally, before we finish, Jeremy, if you could kind of explain to us, if people want to pick your brains about anything, how they get a hold of you, and maybe just briefly explain, you've touched on it in the webinars that you've been holding, what you're doing on them, and if anyone wants to jump on them as well.
So at Ernest Wilson, obviously, we look after businesses being bought and sold across the whole of the north of England, and we've got a lot of business owners there who are asking questions. So we provide that service, but it's an open, free network. I've been running them every week, completely free on Zoom, and people can dial in and ask questions. And whether it's about funding or grant funding or debt raising or anything, they can ask whatever they want. But we're just trying to pull the information together. I have my own website that, again, I help people, show them how to structure their request. So don't go to the bank and talk to them like they're Dragon's Den, and don't go to equity funders like they're bank managers. So I show people how to structure the request, how to communicate it, and how to put that together so that the chances of probability are better because you presented better. As I say, I write articles on this about, put yourself in the lender's shoes and think about what they're looking for. They're looking at the probability, the strengths and the weaknesses. They want to say yes. But some people, if they don't present well, they wonder why they get declined. So, it's making sure that people can access in terms of whether that's free webinars, free information, they give me a call, they phone, however, I want to try and help people, show them how to get the best outcome with the best presented case for them.
That's great, Jeremy. And I think that's the point. Our conversation today has been relatively generic because it has to be, because there's so many nuances to it. But in every business life, as we've said, is different and needs that individual discussion. So I guess as well as people like yourself and obviously accountants and various other things that people could speak to. So
massively. The network is really important, Mike. You're absolutely right. And what you're doing with your network is absolutely key because it's about people having trust having knowledge, knowing where they can go to when they need to, and there's no ulterior motive behind it. It's good people helping good people. And if you give out good things come back to you. That's the way the world works.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect way to finish, Jeremy. So thank you for your time. Really useful, and like I said, I'm sure there's plenty of people there that have kind of maybe understood a few more things about what's going on at the moment. So thank you very much for your time. And like, if anyone wants to get a hold of Jeremy, either speak to him directly or speak to us at Northern Affinity, and we've got all the details as well. So thank you very much.
Pleasure. Take care.